Right, let's take you to this story. The Presidential Climate Commission says it will embark on a public and sectoral consultation. The intention is to make a collective recommendation to the President and to government in the first quarter of next year on South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. Let's discuss this further now. We're joined by Dipak Patel, who is the Head of Climate Finance and Innovation at the Presidential Climate Commission. Thank you very much, Mr. Patel, for your time here on eNCA. Now, of course, you can imagine once those public talks do begin, a lot of South Africans will be talking about Eskom and the load shedding that we've seen in the country in the last couple of months.
Good morning, Masako, as well as good morning to your viewers. Thank you. If you wanted me to respond to that, I think we are very much alive to the fact that right now, even though we're looking at the long-term security of energy as well as the well-being of our energy system, and in particular to climate-proof it, so to speak, we are aware that we have a short-term crisis of electricity security, and a lot of that has to do with Eskom's performance as well as Eskom being able to solve some of its own problems. And the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan certainly acknowledges this, and therefore, with respect to at least the $8.5 billion that have been pledged by a combination of international donor countries, a large portion of that is intended to solve for Eskom's energy crisis in the short to medium term, but in a way where we position ourselves to avoid the kind of catastrophic climate change impacts that we're seeing. And just your previous coverage of the high rainfall in Johannesburg and the flooding in Soweto, while I don't want to be the one who sounds an alarm that this might be an expression of climate change, I think certainly the KwaZulu-Natal floods showed that whatever solution we find to our electricity problems must be in a way that ensures that we also respond to the catastrophic climate change impacts that we are likely to feel in an ever-increasing way as we go into the future.
And of course, we know that the President, during his presentation at COP27, he spoke about this Just Energy Transition Plan, and he spoke about three key issues. I think one of them included the electric vehicles and, of course, green hydrogen as well. He also, of course, spoke about what we're going to do as a country once, we move away from mining, which is basically has been for a long time the backbone of this country's economy. And therefore, I just want to know your opinion in terms of, what we've seen in the UK, for instance, where they've been telling the whole world to move away from coal, which is something that we rely on in South Africa. And now they've had to quickly try and sort of procure coal because of the fact that they are unable to get enough energy because of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, Masako, I think the short-term crisis largely arising out of the war in the Ukraine has caused all of Europe, actually, to, in some ways, go back on their climate promises. That out of necessity in the short term to deal with their energy security and in particular to deal with their domestic populations as they move into the winter. I think this short-term almost contradiction that appears in the market should not be confused for a long-term moving away from fossil fuels in general, and coal in particular. And therefore, we as a country, with our dependency for domestic power generation, as well as for our reliance on global markets as it relates to exports of coal, I think in the short term, certainly we need to take advantage of those market conditions, but we need to be alive to the long-term implications of continuing to think that mining in general, but coal mining in particular, can continue to play the socioeconomic role that it has played up till now.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we've heard from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, particularly from the minister in that particular department, saying that as South Africa, we cannot expect to move completely away from coal because it is an industry that, also assist with some of our socio-economic issues. So let me give you an opportunity, though, Mr. Patel, just to give more details in terms of how we as the public can engage with government in the early stages of next year in terms of what the President presented at COP27.
Yes, thank you for that. As we know, the President launched the JET IP, the JET investment, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, on the 4th of November. And we felt that it was very important to unveil this plan to the South African public before we finalized any kind of conclusive negotiations around $8.5 billion with the international partners. The President, in his launching of the JET IP, then made it also clear that we needed to engage all of society in South Africa with respect to what the just energy transition entails, and in particular, how resources are going to be deployed towards not only dealing with our short-term energy crisis, but our long-term energy future. But we needed to do it in a just way. And as you will know, the Presidential Climate Commission really focuses on justice in the transition. And we believe that procedural justice, that is the ability to ensure that all people participate in the processes of decision making, is what catalyzed our intention to consult with broader stakeholders around the JET IP. We intend, as the Presidential Climate Commission, to launch a series of engagements early in the new year with a view to finalizing a PCC recommendation around the JET IP. Now, this consultation process will take many forms. In the first instance, we have organized stakeholders, and that would include organized business, organized labor, organized civil society, as well as youth formations, which in the last year or so have really made an effort to come together into coalitions. And then, of course, there are the areas, that the localities that will be affected as we move through a decarbonization of our electricity system in particular, but also in those localities where electric vehicles are likely to be the new future. And in this case, we will conduct specific community engagements with people in those affected areas, both in terms of general population, but also in terms of organized formations of civil society, business, and community in those localities, to ensure that there is, one, an understanding of what we mean when we talk about a just energy transition, but secondly, to begin to look at how, in this bid not to leave anyone behind in our just transition, we can begin to mobilize not just buy-in, but in fact active participation in the process of new livelihoods for communities in particular in those localities.